We are back here with Dr. Christopher Hubbard here at Atlantic Health Systems, home of Atlantic Sports Health, talking about foot and ankle injuries. How do we prevent them? How do we recover from them? And deep diving into a couple specific injuries. We're going to start off today with the Jones fracture.
Okay. Well, the Jones fracture is fracture at the base of fifth metatarsal. Really, there's three major types of fractures of the fifth metatarsal. The most common is what we call the avulsion, or the fracture of the tubercle. That's really at the real base of the fifth metatarsal. So that's the most common, typically an inversion injury. Almost all of those respond just to a walking boot in time and heal pretty well. Mm-hmm. The second is the dancer's fracture. This is a fracture of the shaft or the mid aspect of the metatarsal bone. Again, those typically heal in a boot and in time. Mm-hmm. It's the Jones fracture, that's the fracture in between those two that is an area of the bone that has less good blood supply. And so in terms of that specific fracture, we see that in basketball players, soccer players, but has a high rate of not uniting without surgery, and then a high rate of uniting and then refracturing. So really in the athlete, the recommendation is a surgical fixation, placing a screw down the middle of the bone to compress and to stabilize that fracture.
Interesting. Dr. Hubbard, there are so many, obviously, injuries at the foot and ankle. What would you share to our parents, our athletes, our people viewing? How do you prevent some of these injuries?
Well, it's a good question. In terms of prevention, I think one big thing is the training and the rate of increasing your activity. And I think that's where we see so many injuries, specifically these stress-related injuries where the ramp up is so quick in terms of impact or running or sports. And so really you want to have a good sort of beginning and slowly increase, whether it's return to sport or preparing for that sport. And so that's a big key. I think, a good stretching program, certainly. So stretching the calf, the hamstrings. So really preventative before and after. And I think those are two of the big keys.
Yeah, and you said a key word, progression.
Yeah.
Really progressing and not starting out right away, kind of going out there and sprinting full, all out, jumping more than you should be jumping. People, sometimes we get carried away. Kids are jumping, they're running, they're doing a lot, and all of a sudden you have to build up that tolerance, right?
And especially coming back from an injury in terms of return. And so,
I was going to ask you that, the rate of reoccurrence of ankle injuries. Like if you had an ankle injury, what's the chances of an ankle injury again? It's much higher.
Yeah, absolutely. And so part of that too is whether you're rehabbing this athlete or they have surgery and they're immobilized for a period of time. But similarly, you have to go back slow, and really that's coming up with a good plan with the trainer or the physical therapist in terms of returning and impact and going back to full contact or full activity. But I think you want to fully be healed so that you don't return and are still compensating, and then something else can happen.
Absolutely. What would be the one most important point you would give someone advice in terms of rehabbing from a foot and ankle injury? What would you say the most important thing you can do if you had an injury and you're rehabbing?
I think it's super important to get in contact and work with physical therapists. I think certainly things you can do on your own. We can teach you some basic things to do on your own, but I think that's the big thing, to have some coordination in terms of a good stretching program, good strengthening program, having somebody to guide you along. And so I think that's the big thing, is really to have somebody to help you with that plan in terms of returning to sports.
Big believer in that. I even with my own kids, if we have a tweak, we have something, we right away, we want to have someone look at that, whether it be someone like yourself, a therapist. Let's get it checked out, because these minor tweaks can turn into bigger challenges, bigger issues, bigger injuries if they're not addressed early. Now, I know some things, you got, maybe it might be something small, fatigue. You're not going to go to a doctor or a therapist with everything. But when it comes to certain pains in the foot and ankle, certain areas that could, really cause this chain reaction, I feel it's very important.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, we see all these stress-related type injuries in athletes and runners. And, it can start as just a, soreness that is, something you can play through or run through. Doesn't maybe affect your performance, but hurts or increasingly is painful, and you continue without that diagnosis, and then it becomes to a point that it gets worse or needs surgery or a larger intervention that could have been prevented.
Couldn't agree more. I think we're so active with our kids today. Athletes are so active, so busy, doing so many things that you need to really know when to bring it down, let your body recover. I think that's a missing link, and that's what you shared here today. So the key is progression, recovery.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So informative.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
There you go. Foot and ankle. Learn more about it, understand the impact it can have on performance, and making sure if we have anything going on, come get it checked out. Make sure you're fully recovered so you can get back to full play.